I carved my own name on a headstone. Full name, birth year, bold as daylight, like I was daring death to come find me. 20 years later, I'm the only one left alive on that stone. Everyone else, already buried beneath it. My name is Eldon Ray Mitchell, and I'm a stone carver in Larkspur, Missouri, a town so small that folks still nod at you on Main Street like your family. I've been chiseling names and dates into granite and marble since 1964, but nothing prepared me for the day I etched my own name onto a headstone. No death date, just Eldon Ray Mitchell, B. 1941. A joke I tossed off for the Scout family in 2002, never dreaming I'd live to see every one of them gone. It was a sunny afternoon when Mr. and Mrs. Scout came in with their 3 kids, excited to create a family memorial before any of them fell ill or grew old. They laughed and said, "You'll outlive us all, Eldon." So on a whim, I carved my name among theirs, like writing your signature on wet cement and daring time to argue. Time carves deeper than any chisel, and stone don't lie, but it sure keeps secrets. Now, 20 years later, I stand at the cemetery gate at dawn, mist hovering over the rows of markers, the air still and smelling faintly of damp earth and the polish of fresh stone. I step between the headstones until I find theirs. 5 names complete. John Scout, his daughter Cassie, Mrs. Scout, and their 2 sons, alongside mine, the only name without an end date. I trace the letters with a weathered finger and feel a chill that isn't from the morning air. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I remember the first obituary notice like it was yesterday. John Scout, heart attack, October 2003. Then Cassie, crash on Highway 61 in 2005. Mrs. Scout, cancer in '06. And finally the boys, victims of the COVID wave in 2020, taken when the world held its breath and hopes ran thin. Each name etched deeper into the stone, each loss carving a hollow into my chest. By 2022, the stone was full, and I stood there thinking I was a man sitting at his own funeral, waiting for dessert. Man, it was crazy. And right then I knew this story isn't just about death or jokes gone too far. It's about how we make marks we never expect to look back on, about legacy and loneliness and the stubborn hope that keeps us coming back to the workshop every morning. If you're curious to know how a joke turned into a lifetime lesson, go ahead and tap that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments what you'd carve on your headstone if you had the chance. Because stone's forever, but stories, that's what really lasts. You learn more about the living carving for the dead, and this one's the tale I'll never forget. I grew up the son of a railroad man and a school teacher in Larkspur, Missouri, a place where the Mississippi breeze carried whispers of history and the pace of life moved as slow as the river itself. To be honest, I never planned on carving stone. I thought I'd be fixing rails or teaching kids to read. But when I was 16, I wandered into my uncle's workshop one Saturday morning and caught the scent of wet lime and fresh granite dust hanging heavy in the air. He handed me a mallet and a chisel and said, "Try to shape that corner, boy." I hesitated. Stone's unforgiving, but as soon as metal met rock, something inside me clicked. I still remember the first chip flying off the slab and that tiny echo in the workshop, like applause in a silent theater. From that moment on, I was hooked. I'd spend my summers apprenticing under him, learning how to read the grain of marble, how limestone sings a different tune under a pointed tool, how granite laughs at the weak strike and grudgingly yields to a well-placed blow. Marbles for lovers, granites for mothers, limestones for folks like me, he used to say, wiping sweat and grit from his brow. I didn't understand then what he meant by folks like me, but now I do. By the time I turned 23, Uncle Jeb handed me the keys to Mitchell Monuments and taught me how to answer the phone, talk prices, and treat every customer with more respect than you'd give a king. "You learn more about the living carving for the dead," he'd remind me, and I carried that lesson into every commission. Over 60 years later, I still walk into that shop every morning at dawn. The world outside has changed. Satellite dishes on rooftops, smartphones buzzing in pockets, kids more likely to text than tip their hat. But inside the workshop, time stands still. The air smells of mixed stone and oil, the walls lined with templates of letter shapes, and the rhythm of hammer against chisel remains the same. I've seen trends come and go. Polished black granite for sleek modern memorials, ornate marble sculptures echoing old-world grandeur, even laser-etched portraits that look more digital than human. But for me, the best part is still the pause before the first chip. A moment of quiet where you ask yourself if you can capture a life in letters and curves, if you can turn cold stone into something that speaks warmth to those left behind. My hands are calloused and gnarled now. Some days the ache in my shoulders reminds me I'm 70, not 16. Yet when I pick up a chisel, I slip right back into that first day, heart pounding with anticipation. I work slowly and deliberately, because stone don't lie, but it sure keeps secrets, and I've learned to listen for them in the grain. Folks in Larkspur know me as the quiet man at the back of the cemetery, hammer in hand, eyes narrowed in concentration. They'll wave as they drive by, and I'll tip my cap in return. I don't speak much, but when I do, I let my words carry weight, like each strike of the chisel, chosen carefully. You might say I'm a philosopher in work boots, shaped by a craft older than this town itself. I wouldn't argue. To me, carving stone isn't just a job. It's a conversation with time, a way to honor lives lived and remind ourselves that what we leave behind matters. So that's who I am, a silent storyteller, a keeper of memories, a man whose life's work is etched in cold rock, but warmed by every soul I've met along the way. That morning in April 2002 felt ordinary at first. The sun was just creeping above the rooftops of Larkspur, casting long shadows across the dusty floorboards of Mitchell monuments. I'd been in the shop since dawn, the air thick with the scent of limestone dust and the faint tang of oil from last night's polish. The half-finished granite slab on my workbench caught the light in streaks, like a promise of stories waiting to be told. I remember leaning in close, running my fingers over the rough surface, thinking about how each chisel strike carries a life's weight. Then the doorbell tinkled, and I looked up to see the Scout family standing there. John and Mary Scout, holding hands with their 3 kids. Cassie, always quick with a grin. Tommy, eyes full of mischief. And little Ellie, clutching her mother's skirt as if she already sensed the solemnity of what we do. They walked in with bright faces, laughter dancing in their voices. John tipped his cap and said, "Mornin', Eldon," like we'd been friends for years, though I'd only carved stones for him once before. Mary smiled, cheeks flushed, and the children circled the templates on the wall, pointing at the script and serif fonts as if they were picture books. I showed them around the workshop, the rack of chisels, my grandfather's old mallet, the template drawings pinned above the bench. I explained how marble yields to a gentle touch and how granite demands respect. Marbles for lovers, granites for mothers, limestones for folks like me, I told them, and Cassie giggled, asking what folks like you meant. I said, folks like me take words meant for hearts and set them in stone. Nobody got too quiet then, just enough reverence to remind us that every name carved here carries a life behind it. John cleared his throat and said, "We're here to set up our family plot. No rush, mind you. Everyone's healthy as a horse, but time has its way of sneaking up on you." He glanced at his kids, ruffling Tommy's hair, and Mary nodded. "We want something simple," she said, "but we'd like to plan ahead, so when the time comes, we won't have to worry." They showed me sketches, pointed to a granite slab with room for 6 inscriptions. Then John caught my eye with a wink and said, "Better leave a spot for you, Eldon. You'll outlive us all." Man, it was crazy how easy he said it, like I couldn't argue. The kids laughed and Mary whispered, "Just a joke, dear." But in that moment, something flickered inside me, a mix of curiosity and a tingle that felt too strange to ignore. I studied the slab, imagining their names lined up. John Scout, born 1968, Mary Scout, born 1970, Cassie Scout, born 1994, Tommy Scout, born 1996, Ellie Scout, born 1999. Then, without thinking twice, I took my chisel and carved under the last line, Eldon Ray Mitchell, B. 1941. I didn't add a death date, didn't even consider it. I stepped back, wiped my brow and said, "There you go, folks. Everyone's name set, voice steady but my heart pounding. They looked at the stone, eyes wide, and I'll never forget that day when John burst out laughing and said, "Well, you're a brave one, Eldon." Mary shook her head, smiling through disbelief, and the kids cheered. I caught a glimpse of the sun catching the letters, as if time itself was paused for a heartbeat. That was the trigger, the moment when a harmless joke turned into something I couldn't undo, something that set the stage for 20 years of surprises, loss, and the quiet lessons a piece of granite can teach you about life and legacy. I still remember the morning I got the call. John Scout, right there on the front page of the Larkspur Gazette. John W. Scout, 1968 to 2003, sudden passing. My hammer froze in midair, and a chill ran down my spine. Time carves deeper than any chisel, and this was no gentle tap. To be honest, I hadn't taken that family plot seriously beyond the laugh we all shared that day in 2002. John's heart had given out, an honest heart attack, and suddenly the tribute we'd planned as a light-hearted precaution turned into a real marker of loss. I closed the Gazette and stared at the workbench, at the name I'd carved under theirs without a death date, like a dare to fate. I felt the limestone dust in my lungs as if it had thickened into gray smoke, and for a moment I questioned whether I should finish my morning's work or just walk out into the fog and let the workshop swallow me whole. To keep moving, I forced myself to lean over that family stone. My chisel met the granite and sang its harsh note. I added John's end date, my hand shaking so badly the serif edge looked jagged. November 12th, 2003, I whispered under my breath, tracing each numeral with more care than ever before. But when I stepped back, I noticed how my own name glowed mockingly beside his name. A bright B1941, glaring at me like the punchline of a cruel joke. I wiped sweat and tears from my brow, though I couldn't tell if it was grief or panic. Stone don't lie, but it sure keeps secrets, and this one felt like a loaded gun in my pocket. A week later, Cassie Scout's name appeared in an all-caps headline. Local teen killed in Highway 61 collision. My phone rang at dawn, that brittle ring slicing through sleep. I answered. Her mother's voice cracked, asking if I could update the inscription. By the time I reached the workshop, I was shaking so hard I dropped the mallet. I set up the scaffolding and positioned the ladder, hands clammy on the rungs. Up there, chisel in hand, I felt like I was chiseling away at my own chest. The date, June 5th, 2005, etched itself in blood-cold granite under her name, and I caught my reflection in the polished surface, a gaunt man with hollow eyes scratching away at tragedy. Each time I filed the stone afterward, Mary Scout's cancer date, the boys' COVID-19 dates, the marble dust became harder to breathe. I started arriving earlier, staying later, so I wouldn't have to face those empty spaces at home or the weight in my chest. My apprentice, young Bobby, noticed I'd grown quieter, more withdrawn. He asked if I was all right. I just told him, "I'm fine, boy," and let the machine run. The diamond saw slicing granite into perfect slabs. Inside, I was wrestling with a question I never thought I'd ask myself. Do you remove a name you carved as a joke, one you never meant to see again? Or do you scrub off your own memory and act like none of this ever happened? That's when the real dilemma set in. Every morning I'd stand before that headstone in the yard behind the shop and stare at the blank death date space beside my name. If I filled it in now, it would feel like conceding defeat. Time won, I lost. But if I left it blank, it would mock me every time I passed it, a reminder that stone's forever, but life isn't. I'd spend hours there, tapping my boot against the grass, waiting for some answer to come chiseling through the silence. The Scout family's plot had become more than a job. It was a mirror held up to my own mortality, and so everything got complicated. What began as a simple commission turned into a reckoning with every life I'd touched through my craft. Every time I believed a joke could outlast a lifetime. It was a stormy afternoon in March 2022 when everything came to a head. I'd poured every ounce of myself into that workshop at dawn, then driven straight to the cemetery before the rain hit, my old Ford rattling down Country Road 14. The sky boiled gray above me as I climbed the ladder, leaning against the Scout family monument. Rain spatters slicking the granite beneath my boots. My heart thundered louder than the storm. I held the chisel poised next to the blank space under my name, the place where my death date belonged. For weeks I'd wrestled with the decision: fill in that empty line like conceding a duel I couldn't win, or leave it blank and live with the taunt of unfinished business every time I passed. Time carves deeper than any chisel, they say, but in that moment the roles felt reversed. I tightened my grip and drew a deep breath, remembering John's easy laugh the day I first carved my name there. I remembered Cassie's bright grin and how she traced the letters with a finger that never shivered. I remembered Mary's soft sob when I added her end date, how she held my hand and whispered thanks through tears, and the boy's mother rocking in her chair in 2020 when I hammered out their final mark. Each loss had cut me deeper than any storm or chisel blow. I closed my eyes and pictured every face, every life I'd honored in stone, and I felt the weight of their trust pressing into my chest. Lightning split the sky, and a boom of thunder rattled the trees. I raised the chisel high, ready to carve March 3rd, 2022, beside my name. My apprentice Bobby's voice cut through the wind. "Mr. Mitchell, are you sure about this?" He stood at the foot of the ladder, drenched, eyes wide. I hesitated, chisel trembling in the downpour, and for the first time felt unsure. That blank space wasn't just an end. It was a challenge, a dare to fate. If I inscribed it, I'd be declaring my surrender. If I didn't, I'd be living under a sentence I refused to finish. The rain stung my face like sharp whispers, and I heard Mary's words, "Time has its way of sneaking up on you," echoing in my mind. I thought of the families I'd served, folks I'd never meet again, and how their grief had become part of my own. The granite beneath me glistened like a mirror, reflecting the old man I'd become and the boy who first split his heart on that workshop slab in 1957. I thought about what legacy really means. Was it the dates we leave behind, or the stories we carve into the hearts of others? I dropped the chisel. It clanged against the stone, ringing like a verdict. Bobby gasped, but I just looked down at him and said, "Not today, son." Then I lifted my hand and, instead of the date, traced a new inscription in furious, excited strokes. "Still here." Each letter rang clear in the storm. Defiance, hope, laughter carved into the cold rock. The thunder rolled its approval, and I felt a fierce joy I hadn't known in years. I climbed down, soaked but lighter than air, and pressed a hand flat to the polished surface. "Stone don't lie," I muttered, "but it sure keeps secrets." That was the moment I decided my story wasn't over, that my place on that headstone wasn't a tombstone, but a testament to every dawn I'd yet to greet. In the wind and rain, Bobby smiled and said, "I'll never forget that day." I still get goosebumps thinking about it. And when you face your own blank line, ask yourself, what will you carve there? I climbed down from that ladder, soaked to the bone, heart still hammering like a mallet on chiseled granite. And I realized the story I'd carved was more than just defiance. It was an invitation to keep living. In the days that followed, word spread through Larkspur faster than a crack in marble. Folks came by the shop, pausing at the workshop gate to stare at the Scout family monument, their eyes widening at "Still Here" etched beneath my name. Some tipped their hats and offered quiet nods. Others stifled a laugh. And a few children asked Bobby, "Who's Eldon Mitchell?" He'd grin and say, "He's the man who carves stories in stone." I watched their faces light up, and for the first time in years felt the weight on my shoulders ease. The dilemma that had gripped me, whether to surrender to time or to challenge it, dissolved as I realized that life's true measure isn't the date on a headstone, but the moments we choose to keep adding to our own story. I returned to the workshop with fresh eyes. The tools didn't seem so heavy. The air no longer tasted of grief, but of possibility. I took Bobby aside and showed him how to sharpen a letter's edge until it sings under the hammer's strike. "Stone don't lie," I told him, "but it sure keeps secrets. It's up to us to decide which ones to let go." He watched intently, his knuckles white around the handle, and I felt the same thrill I'd had at 16 when Uncle Jeb first let me swing that chisel. Soon a steady stream of new commissions arrived. A simple granite marker for old Mrs. Callahan, a polished white marble cross for the churchyard, even a community bench carved with names of the town's founding families. But every time I set the chisel to stone, I remembered that line beside mine. "Still here," and I didn't rush. I worked slowly, deliberately, listening to each slab's whisper, letting its message guide the cut. The Scout family plot remains one of my most personal pieces, not because of the tragedy, but because it taught me that humor and hope can be as enduring as any granite memorial. Mary Scout stopped by one afternoon, walking with a cane, and she placed a gentle hand on the polished surface. "You gave us comfort in our darkest days," she said, voice trembling. I nodded, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. The children, now grown, visited too, sharing stories of their mother, their father, and their sister, tracing her name with reverent fingers. They laughed when they reached my "Still Here" inscription, and I laughed with them, knowing that in stone and in story, we're all connected. At 70, I'm slower, my hands a bit unsteady, but I feel more alive than ever. Every morning I still walk into Mitchell monuments at dawn, inhale the mingled scent of wet lime and granite dust, and greet each blank slab with a question: what story will you tell? I teach Bobby not just to carve letters, but to listen, to the stone, to the people, and to the quiet voice inside that says, keep going. And when I'm ready, I'll return to the Scout plot to decide if I'll ever fill in my end date. But for now, I'm content to leave that space open, a testament to a life still unfolding. After all, I carved my own name on a headstone, outlived every one of them, and discovered that legacy isn't about when you die. It's about how boldly you choose to live. I'll never shake the way that afternoon in the rain changed me. Standing at the Scout family monument, chisel in hand and thunder rolling overhead, I realized I'd spent decades shaping other people's legacies without ever confronting my own. After I carved "Still Here" under my name, something shifted inside me. I stopped seeing stone as cold and final and started viewing it as a canvas for bold declarations and private truths. In the weeks that followed, every time I walked past that headstone, I felt a quiet pride instead of dread. I'd turned what could have been my surrender into a statement of defiance, and it reminded me that our attitudes toward fate shape more of our lives than fate itself. Back in the workshop, I noticed small things differently. The morning light through the dusty window looked warmer, and the rhythm of hammer on chisel sounded more like music than labor. I found myself humming old blues tunes while carving, something I'd never done before. I was too worried about perfection. I even started taking short breaks to step outside and breathe in the Larkspur air, something I'd skipped for years, lost in the groove of deadlines and memorial orders. Emotionally, I felt lighter. The weight of those blank death dates that once pressed on my mind had lifted, replaced by the knowledge that whatever tomorrow holds, I can meet it with humor and heart. I still carry a small notebook where I jot down ideas, phrases I might carve next, memories I want to honor, witty quips that deserve a place on stone. My apprentice Bobby noticed the change too. He said I seemed more open, more willing to share stories instead of guarding them like secret patterns. I began inviting him to come along when I checked on the Scout plot, explaining why I chose "Still Here" and how carving your own narrative is the truest form of art. That conversation sparked a new tradition. Every spring, Bobby and I visit once more, clean the monument, polish the letters, and leave a fresh flower by the stone. It's become a reminder that our work matters beyond the shop. Stone monuments can hold grief and hope in the same breath. On a personal level, I feel more connected to life than ever. I'm more patient with neighbors who drop by unannounced, more curious about the stories behind new commissions, and more eager to laugh in the face of time's tricks. Sure, I'm still silent and dry with words most of the time, but inside I'm rediscovering the joy that first drew me to the chisel. After all, stone may not lie, but it can carry anything you choose to carve into it: fear, love, defiance, or hope. And now I live each day ready to shape my own legacy, one careful strike at a time. I learned that legacy isn't something you wait for at the end of life. It's built in every choice you make and every story you share. Carving "Still Here" under my own name taught me that you don't have to surrender to time. You can challenge it with humor and intention. I discovered that stone, though cold and unyielding, becomes a vessel for our boldest declarations and deepest truths when we approach it with courage. More than technical skill, carving taught me empathy. To listen to the grain, To honor each person's life behind the name and to allow space for surprise in our own stories. I realize that life's most meaningful marks aren't the dates on a headstone, but the moments when we choose to lean into uncertainty, to embrace our own presence, and to invite others to witness that defiance. In my decades at the bench, I thought I was preserving memories for families. In truth, they preserved one for me. The lesson that we shape our own narrative as much as any chisel-shaped stone. Whatever you face, loss, doubt, the blank lines ahead, remember that you hold the tool. You decide what goes into the space beside your name. Time may carve deeper than any hand, but it doesn't write your story alone. You do. Word of that day in the rain spread through the cemetery, trade faster than a crack in polished granite. Fellow carvers in neighboring towns began calling Mitchell monuments, the shop with the joke that outlived a lifetime, and I found myself fielding invitations to speak at regional monument makers' gatherings. They wanted to hear how a simple act of defiance, etching "Still Here" under my own name, had transformed a routine commission into a story about resilience and the power of humor and grief. At the annual Midwestern Memorial Arts Conference, I stood before a room full of seasoned craftsmen and apprentices, hammer in hand, and shared the tale. I could see their eyes light up as I described that thunder-soaked moment and the unexpected freedom I felt afterward. Back in Larkspur, the locals began dropping off unusual requests, not just birth and death dates, but personal mottos, secret jokes, and lines of poetry meant to surprise future generations. One family asked me to carve a riddle they'd composed themselves. Another wanted a message in a bottle motif with a tiny chiseled inscription inside a recessed niche. I welcomed each challenge, teaching Bobby and any newcomer that our job isn't just to mark endings. It's to capture beginnings, midpoints, and the humor that sustains us. Over the next few years, Mitchell Monuments became known for its creative inscriptions, and I got to mentor 4 more apprentices who came to learn how to balance respect for tradition with the courage to innovate. I showed them how to listen to the stone's grain, how to shape letters that dance instead of stand stiffly, and most importantly, how to collaborate with families to uncover the messages they didn't know they wanted. Even the scout children, now grown with children of their own, visit each spring to polish the monument and share memories. They bring fresh flowers and we laugh about how their dad never doubted I'd outlive him, even on his last day. I've never faced a commission quite like that one again, but I carry its lesson into every project, that a headstone isn't just a silent marker, it's a conversation across time. Today I still carve slowly and deliberately, but I'm more willing to leave an unexpected line or two. After all, if a simple phrase under my name could become a legend, imagine what unusual words might do for someone else's story. Stone doesn't lie, but it does invite us to speak up, and sometimes the most memorable messages come from the boldest strokes. You've listened to my story, seen how a simple joke in 2002 turned into decades of reflection and sparked a shift not just in my craft, but in how I choose to live each day. When I carved "Still Here" under my own name, I wasn't just messing with fate. I was making a promise to myself and to anyone who stops by that stone workshop, at a cemetery gate, or on this very screen, that our choices matter more than our end dates. I've learned that carving names and dates is only half the work. The other half is carving out a life worth remembering, one deliberate strike at a time. So here's my question for you, the person watching this video right now. If you could carve a single word or phrase on a headstone marked only with your name and birth year, no death date, what would it be? Would you choose something brave, something humorous, something that reveals your secret stubborn hope? Or would you leave it blank and let the world wonder what you really thought about life? Think of that challenge as your own piece of granite, waiting for your chisel. Drop your answer in the comments. Let's see whose message outlasts the chisel's echo.